One of the things that we had talked about a couple of weeks ago, or even last week, was understanding an issue, and I had given you guys a homework thing to work on where you break down a situation, the thoughts, the emotions, the beliefs, and the action. Thank you. Have a light, man. That's great. Did anybody have a chance to look at this, or does anybody have any kind of input on what you did to try to understand when things happen, how you're breaking them down? And if you didn't, just pretend you did. That would probably help. Yeah, no, I didn't intend for that, and I really wanted y'all to keep it separate. And then, man, and I don't want to hear the dirty laundry part of it, but just in general, before y'all got to the fighting part, was there anything good that came out of it? Did you begin to understand what you were going through, either one of you guys? Yeah, I think sometimes when we're angry or hurt or disappointed, that it's just kind of like it's just a thing. It's like this big, massive anger ball, and then to break it down, you begin to realize what's really under this. So that's good to know. How about you? Yeah, I liken it. This may sound like a strange analogy, but sometimes I get hurt, like I'll get my back hit or something, fall off a ladder or whatever. And if I go to the doctor, he says, "Where does it hurt?" And I go, "My whole back hurts." I mean, it's the whole thing, And then over the days, the pain begins to shrink and localize, and then I find out there's one main spot that got hit, and it was transferring all this pain to all these places. And this is kind of that way where at first it's just, I don't know, I'm just angry, and then as we calm down and begin to do some of this, we begin to realize what particular thing. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is what, in my anger, what is it that I really was feeling or believing or thinking, so that I can go to the real problem. I can go to God in the beginning, I'm really angry, I can't see straight, all I see is red, and God is there and He listens to me. But to be able to just kind of process through this, not just mentally process it, I'm an internal processor, so that's where it usually happens with me, but to actually have to write this out, and I don't write it out anymore, I just talk it out. I just go, okay, here's what happened, and I know what my default emotions are, and I know what my default beliefs are going to be, so I can get there a lot quicker than I used to be able to get there. But still, if I'm angry, I don't know why. It's just, I see red or whatever you want to call it. It's all one big junky pile of stuff. And then as I break it down, I just ask God to reveal to me, where's my sin in this? What is it that hurts so bad? Where is this coming from? Number one, so I can pray more specifically, and so that I can really begin to understand, because I'm going to take this information, work through my issues, ask God to change my heart, and then I'm going to go back and talk to my wife, hopefully more maturely, with more understanding this time around. And she's doing usually the same thing, so that when we talk again, it's much more productive. It's not just, well, you hurt me and you tried to, out of anger, that's where that usually goes. When the anger subsides and we begin to realize, what was it in me that got triggered, that I'm this upset, it helps me to go in much more calmly. Yes? Yeah, and I think kind of like what you guys were asking when I ran into y'all last week, is to do this alone, and before you come back together, and you will kind of own yours and you kind of own yours, and then we'll work on the communication piece. That's why I want you guys doing this as much as you can, so that when we move towards the communication, that you know how to break issues down, and then you can come back and communicate. And then when we're communicating it, it's going to be one person's talking and the other person is really just listening, and then validating back and forth, but not at the same time. I think what we have a tendency to do is, well, this is what I thought, emotions, beliefs, and actions, and then the other usually chimes in and goes, well, that's ridiculous, because I was feeling the same thing, and I'm trying to break that pattern and get it to where one person describes what they're going through, and the other person And it's kind of difficult when you're still angry. So that's why the takeaway or the break of taking time to work through this so that I come in more calmly and then I can say what I think now is going on. And then hopefully my wife has done the same thing. So the second meeting is much more peaceful. Now we may get in there and I may find new information that really makes me mad. And I may say, this is new. I thought this, but now I'm hearing this. I need to go kind of process this a little bit. And then we'll kind of go our little separate ways, do our processing, and come back together. And it's not uncommon to take a week to work through something. Most people want it ended, to end the conflict very quickly. And we're learning that the quick conflict ending usually shortcuts the process, and we never really resolve it. And so we want to really resolve it, knock it out of the park, and we don't want it coming back. So we're learning to live more and more in the tension of just because you're not liking me right now, I don't have to be upset. I'm working on my stuff, you can work on your stuff. And it's that differentiation thing that I've mentioned before, where you be you and I'll be me, and I've got stuff to work through, but just because you're angry, I don't have to match you. And just because you're sad, I don't have to feel guilty like I did this. I may have contributed to it majorly, but I don't know yet because I haven't worked through my own stuff. Any other comments? And that's why we did it in this order. If we'd gone reverse, this would be very shallow, because then we'd be going, okay, I'm hurt and I'm sad. We don't really know why. I mean, we don't know where some of those things might have come from, but that's why it was kind of a slow process, but now we're going to kind of get into more of the meat of it, and it will become much more practical. And the beliefs part is going to be one of the next sections, because when we understand what the belief is that's behind all of this, and I really believe it's behind all of it, is that if we go into a situation with a belief of shame or inadequacy or unloved or defective or whatever, then we're going to taint everything that's said, or we're going to hear. And I'm going to show you a little cartoony thing that I drew that kind of shows that, but I think it's very real. It's not to be funny. One little piece is, but it is, so I appreciate you saying that, because I think that the understanding now, we can move in and go to compassion, whereas before we just go in to defend ourselves and try to win an argument, or just go through a bunch of skills that stay in this kind of top level stuff and never really get to the heart. When you stay on the top level stuff, just the arguing facts and, well, you said this, well, you said this, well, I meant this, no, you didn't, you meant this. If we stay up in there, you're just looking for a winner or a loser, and there's neither. And if you lose, your whole marriage lose. We've gone through that before, that if there's a winner, there's a loser, and if there's a loser, your marriage took a hit. So this needs to be a win-win. Now, you may have a standoff, and there may be an agree to disagree, and maybe not very happy that you don't see it my way and I don't see it your way. But even that can be a resolve if I can accept that you have a different opinion than I have, and that's okay. I don't like it, but I understand you're you and I'm me, and that's where that differentiation part comes in, and it's real important to not need the other person to see what to agree with you. Although I think a lot of times when people say you're not getting it, you're not listening to me, that's another whole thing, and we've talked about it a little. We'll get into it some more. But anyone else get anything out of it? Yeah. Can. Yeah, and I think the key to it, did you want to elaborate on that? I don't blame you. I think it sounded like you were through. I just didn't want to interrupt you, but it can open up a can of worms. But if the can of worms is there, if we do it real quickly, then we ignore what the depth or the magnitude of the problem. And so now, if it adds new stuff, then something might be going wrong with that process. But I need some time to think through this. Usually in a relationship, there's a pursuer and a withdrawer. Now, you can have two pursuers. That's firecrackers, or you can have two withdrawers. That's a very quiet marriage. There's rarely arguments, but usually there's a pursuer and a withdrawer. The key is when the withdrawer withdraws, to use that time wisely and to go through this process and then to come back. The coming back is the part that most people fail at, is they pull away, the coast is clear, peace is happening, everybody's kind of happy, and they're going, why would I bring it up now? You're happy. I mean, you want to talk about an argument when we're happy? That's kind of dumb, but that's the time to do it because everybody's happy and you can be more reasonable. But I think that's where a lot of that, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's where I see it break down the most is one will pull away or set a boundary of if you're going to insult me, I'm not going to do this right now. We'll come back later when we're both calm, and then there's no coming back because that's no fun. But that's where the resolve, I think, really comes in. Anyone else? It's real good. And as we get into this, I don't think we'll get that far today, but if we do, there's the longer of these is on there. I kind of wanted to walk you through it. I'll probably bring copies next week to kind of hand out so that you guys can start taking. That's why I would say do this again this week 2 or 3 times or as many as you can to get this down, because the next 5, it's not that they're so difficult. I just want you to be able to knock this out so that you can get to the other stuff. Then it won't be quite as overwhelming when you look at a large page with 10 or 15 questions on it. You'll have already kind of mastered, so to speak, or at least be very familiar with the first 5. Anyone else want to talk about something on this before I move on? This is y'all's class. I want to hear if it's difficult. Was there anything in this that you didn't understand or that was tough? And yeah, and I think the busyness of life takes over, and if we make that time, I mean, the goal is moving towards intimacy. That if once you really get honest and vulnerable, if I can come in and say, you know what, I realized why I was so upset, and I'm so sorry. I realized that that triggered something that went back there. That's my responsibility. Would you forgive me for going off on you for something that was my junk? I've just created a bond with my wife of trust. And I've been vulnerable and I've confessed, or she may have done the same thing. And then the intimacy grows in the relationship, so the not making the time stops it from ever getting to the place where there is a resolve and there's a closeness and there's an intimacy. And I mean an intimacy, not just, I'm not talking about bedroom intimacy. I'm just talking about deeper being known and accepted, that kind of, all of us want to be accepted for who we are. And that's such a difficult thing. But I hear you. It is difficult to make time to sit down and go through things. You don't know if it's going to be 15 minutes or 3 hours worth of stuff, or is this going to drag on another week? But the forcing of going through it, I think, gets to a place where you begin to build trust and intimacy. Yes? Yeah, when I'm working with a couple on arguing, we're going to do one issue at a time. So if you say, Chuck, I hate your boots, and I go, you know what, there's 3 things about you I don't like. I've just deflected the issue that we first started with, and I'm now kind of trying to overwhelm you if I'm just shooting, trying to defend myself. So I would say, we'll talk about what an idiot parent I am in just a few minutes, but right now I would like to really talk about what we're talking about. And so we stay on one issue until it really is completely resolved. What it also does when it is resolved well is it softens the other issues a little bit. There's a little more hope, there's a little more vulnerability, and then we can talk about another issue. But yeah, I won't do 2 issues at once. And when I see it deflecting, I just stop it and point it out. And it's hard to do that because we're so used to trying to trump the other person's issue. And it's a deflection. I don't really want to talk about what a junkie person I am or what a mistake that I've made. So deflecting onto things that you do worse than you think I do that bad. Let me tell you what you've done 4 times this week. That's more natural for us. And what that tells me is if I'm doing that, I'm not really listening to you. I've listened to you and I'm going, okay, now you're trying to hurt me. Now I'm planning my counterattack. And if I'm doing that, I'm not listening. So when we start working on the listening skill, you really are listening because there's going to be a test coming of what did they say. And if you're planning your attack, a lot of times I won't tell people what I'm looking for. I want to just see how they're going to do it. And I go, would you tell him what he said? And there's just this blank stare of, I've been planning a whole attack here, and you want me to actually, So they haven't been listening. They've kind of shut it down and go, okay, here's some things, and here we go, and I've got to do my thing. But when we work on this, and there's one speaker and there's one listener that says, here's what I'm hearing. I hear you saying that you're hurt and you were sad, and then there's a moving towards, then we're really going to really comfort the one person, not at the other person's expense. We're going to swap it as soon as it's over, and we're going to go back the other direction and find out what was on their mind, and then we're going to move towards them. So it all gets done, but it does stay on one issue and one side of the issue, because we can't just say, I'm hurt and sad. Well, I'm hurt and sad. Now we're back to this again, and we just need to kind of focus in on each person and validate that what they're going through matters to me. It doesn't mean I agree with your perspective. It means that I care about you, and if you're sad and hurt, that matters to me. And so that's where the validation and you do get me kind of things come from. That's a great question. Okay. One of the things that's interesting in here, the beliefs. And you can see these in the middle up here, the beliefs, I'm unappreciated, insignificant. These are the negative beliefs. There's a whole nother positive beliefs that we'll see as we go along. But assuming that our flesh is in control and we're hurt from our past, we kind of looked at that chart last week where you've got a feeling and you can go towards the benefit of the feeling, or you can go towards the impairment of the feeling, and we might even show that again in a minute. But I wanted to show you if one person has a core belief system that actually says something like, I'm inadequate, I'm defective, I never measure up, then we will begin to hear words through that grid, and I can tell you that what you meant was to hurt me. Whereas y'all have had conversations, many of you, most couples, where one person says A and the other person hears B, and the person says, that's not what I meant. Yes, it is. It is what you meant. You meant to hurt me, and you meant to put down, And so all of a sudden there's this mind reading, clairvoyant mentality of, I know what you meant, and this is my response to that. And so I want to show you where a lot of that comes from. I would say in core beliefs and communication, this is my little magic couple that I draw so well. Never had an art class, but isn't that shocking, really? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people say that. Okay, so here's Bill and Jane, and I don't even know a Bill and Jane, so this is not y'all, I can guarantee you that. But I just want to show just a brief example of here's Bill's core belief system. Let's assume he feels inadequate, he feels unlovable, unappreciated, he must perform to have value. Maybe he was an athlete, and when he scored, he was awesome, but when he fumbled, he was the GOAT. I mean, I don't know. It just, these things happen. And maybe he got the message that you're never really good enough. These are just A's. I expect A pluses. I've heard those stories. I just wanted A's. I can't believe, I'd be like, woo, let's kill the fatted cow. This kid made a, But growing up, those were more difficult. So let's say that Bill goes through life. When things get stressful, this core belief system gets it kind of activated, okay? So then we start hearing through this grid. So she's going to ask a pretty simple question. Going to the grocery, how much money is in the account? Okay? Let me kind of, okay, so now Bill doesn't hear this face value. Bill doesn't hear how much money do we have. We have this much money. Bill hears, oh, I see. So here's Bill's take on this deal. I mean, this is a very real thing. I've done this in front of women's groups and couples groups, and the women can't believe, but most men identify with this. And the women go, why? And I go, I have no idea, but we need to understand. Now, women hear other things as well, so I'm just picking on the man because I'm up here, and I figure that nobody will be quite as offended if I do. So here's what he hears. Oh, I see. So you're a bad provider. I bet we're broke. That's what he hears her saying when she just said how much money's in the checking account. You stink at money management. You're such a loser. And you'll never amount to anything. That's what he hears. If that's his core belief system, that's probably somewhat what he hears. Anybody ever heard anything like that before? I see nodding heads, so I know you're not going to speak up because then you got it. It's all on. Okay, so now here's what happens to Bill. Some of y'all have seen this before. This is the sad part. See, his legs fell off. It just absolutely cut him off at the knees. Yeah, that took about 45 minutes again. I don't know why I can't get it quicker, but but what happens is Bill is actually undone by the question. He feels like, or he believes that she's trying to hurt him and shame him. Now, I have, from speaking with enough women's groups and had some pretty honest women, about 2/3 of the women don't really mean to shame. They really want to know how much money's in the checking account. I don't want to bounce a check because then I'm, messing up. And then we got, bank fees and insufficient this. We got to rewrite a check. It's a little embarrassing. But some women actually do shame on purpose, and they know where men get hit hardest and do know how to knock them at the knees, so to speak. So I'm not saying that I don't know what y'all do, but I have had women say, I do this on purpose. And then when I kind of queried the room, 2/3 of the women said, I don't want him to go to shame. I just want to know how much money is in the account. And then about 1/3 of the room said, we know what we're doing. This is how this is our passive aggressive way of getting back, is that they know that the man will go to shame. Now here's a different core belief system. Same lovely couple. Okay, here we go. It's as if I'm drawing now, but okay, so now let's say this is Bill's core belief. He's secure in God's love for him. He's cherished by God. He knows he's forgiven. He's saved by grace. He's loved and he's appreciated. The list could go on and on. So this guy is getting his value from who he is in Christ, not who he thought he was growing up, or how he's not being defined by his past. He's choosing to be defined by the truth of the Scripture. Any questions on what's going on? So he's coming into any situation already pretty, well, not confident like cocky confident, but very secure in his faith that he's allowed God to determine his value, not other people, not a wife, not a husband, not a people at work, not what will people think at church. This person in particular, I've never met anybody like this, but I'm sure they're out there somewhere. Okay, so now she says, I'm going to the grocery. How much money's in the account? Same question. Here's Bill, $200. Thanks for asking. There's no offense. There's no attack. I'm not hearing through this warped mindset of core beliefs. My core belief is I'm secure in who I am in Christ. I mean, maybe his question is she trying to, well, I don't know why I would think that. She normally doesn't. And so this could be it's a matter of fact, could be a matter of fact question with a very matter of fact answer. I mean, it's kind of like the example I've given before. You can ask me 3 questions about my shirt. Where'd you get that shirt? And the first one goes, where'd you get that shirt? Like there's something wrong with me, or where'd you get that shirt? Now there's something wrong with my shirt. Or you could just say, where did you get that shirt? And I would say, I have no, but this is at Eddie Bauer kind of thing. One is, I've got a chip on my shoulder. Where'd you get that shirt? What's wrong with my shirt, dude? I mean, like, what are you trying to say? That's a core belief tainted response. When somebody, now if they came with an attitude of if they really rolled their eye, where'd you get that stupid, then we're on, so to speak. We're in the back of the parking lot. But in general, we add meaning to what people say by what we think they meant or what they've meant in the past. So if you've ever meant anything bad in the past, which all of us that are sinners have, which is all of us, then it's almost like we don't ever get credit for the good times. It's just assumed that you did it. I mean, I have some people say, well, you always do that. Well, like when? Well, remember that one time one time now feels like always to some people. I mean, men or women. It's just, that's how we do things. But what this is an example of is a very matter of fact. It's like somebody texted this and somebody texted it back and no one added tone or meaning to the it's just data. Where did you get that shirt? I got it here. So if I read into stuff, then I'm adding meaning to something that somebody else is saying. Now I could say, help me understand what you mean by that. It kind of sounds like you're kind of putting down my shirt or you're putting me down. Is that what you're meaning to do? And they're going to go, no, I like your shirt. I want to go get one just like it. Or, yeah, you're a jerk and I just don't want to get anything you have. I don't know what they mean, but by asking, I can actually start to clarify, and then I'm assuming they tell me the truth or they don't. Oh, yeah. I don't think any of us are always here. I think this is the flesh and the spirit waging war all the time. And I think that as we get more and more secure in Christ, more and more this can be our response. But no, yeah, I think you're exactly right. I don't think we ever always respond this way. But I can't say we never always respond the other way. If we're not working in this, and we're going to go into this much more deeply of where we really get our value, that's down the road. But this would be you'd be more apt to have this response more frequently if you're really walking well with God and your belief is beginning to change and the things of the past are declining in their power over determining or defining who we are. Different speeds, different levels. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that says I'm here and you should be, and if I'm here and you're here, and I think that's something wrong with that. I mean, maybe pride and arrogance is my problem. Maybe I'm not so high as I thought I was. Maybe I go to a bunch of Bible studies and stuff, but now I look down on other people that aren't as spiritual as me. So I just swapped the position. So you're exactly right. So this is not a perfect science or a very concrete thing. This is just an example of how powerful our belief system is and how we see everything. So as we're moving towards and walking in the Spirit and spending time in the Word and praying, then we kind of set ourselves up more for success like this when we just kind of blow and go and we're not feeding ourselves. I mean, I've told the story before. There's the famous, or not famous, the wise man in the land that was, the guy, and the little kid came up and said, "How is it that you're so wise? People say you're the wisest man in the land." And he says, "There's two dogs inside of me and they're fighting all the time." And the little boy says, "Well, which dog wins?" And he says, "Whichever one I feed the most." And that, for me, I heard that probably 30-something years ago, but that to me helps me understand that when I'm really walking or attempting to walk well with God, I'm feeding more the Spirit side of me. If I'm living the other way, I'm feeding more the flesh side of me. And so what I find for me is that when I'm walking well or more well with God, that I'm much less critical, much less judgmental. I don't hear with a chip on my shoulder as much. I'm not perfect. I'm just better than I was if I'm not, if that helps at all. Just about 1,800 times every day. Yep, back and forth. Yeah, it is. It's the flesh. I mean, we're never going to conquer the flesh on this earth, so it's going to always go back and forth at different times. What I want to do is I want to feed the spirit man more and more, and I want the flesh guy to win less and less. I want to be less defined by what my flesh is saying. You're inadequate, you're a loser, you're worthless, you'll never amount to anything. I want that voice to shut up, and I want the voice of my Father who says, I carefully wove you in your mother's womb. I love you. Your hand is, your name is written in my hand. I care about what you care about. That's what I want more permeating my whole being. Again, walking in the Spirit, and you won't carry out the desire of the flesh. And so that's more, and we'll get more into that on maybe a more practical level later. But yeah, absolutely. I think we will always go back and forth. I don't think there's anyone that's immune to either. I mean, to going back and forth. I think we're sinners saved by grace. So we're going to sin. We're going to see things wrong, and we're going to do, like you said, somewhere in between this. Maybe some this, maybe some of this. So it's not a hard, fast rule. It's just kind of a comparison of two completely different belief systems, and we really want to hone in on this type of a belief system. Okay. Now I want to take something that we talked about a little bit last week and the week before, which was fear. And I mentioned that I wanted to bring in kind of an example I use a lot in counseling. And there's some, and by the way, there are homework assignments up here. If you didn't get them, you can get them at the end of class. They're on the website. You can go to chucksugar.com, go to the videos, and on the video dates are the links to these documents, so you can get homework and stuff if you want to do it over and over. But I want to talk about when fear happens, that there's really two main paths that I can think of, and this is a pretty frequent dynamic that I see a lot in a lot of us. So we've got fear. And fear is going to go one of several places. But the first place that, if we talk about where the flesh is going to go, fear usually goes to control. When fear goes to control, we're off to a bad start. In other words, I'm afraid of something. I need to reduce this fear. Maybe I'm afraid I don't matter. Maybe I'm afraid of rejection. So my control might be staying away from people or making sure people like me. Control is going to lead to controlling behaviors. And then here's some controlling behaviors. It's not all of them, but here's some. So pride would be a controlling behavior. Anxiety is going to be an indicator of control. In other words, I can't control something. I'm very anxious, or I'm worried about how am I going to control this? This is out of control. I need to address my fear. We all have fears. I mean, like somebody said the other day, it's probably one of the most used words in the Bible. Fear not is in there probably, I don't know how many times, it's a bunch. But I think this is the process. So when we fear Just about anything. I can't. I mean, now there's the fear that's the reverence of God. That's not the fear I'm talking about. I'm talking about scared to death. I'm scared. I'm upset that I'm going to lose something that's very important to me. So worry is a controlling behavior. It's self. We move to self-protection. I need to make sure that this fear isn't accomplished. Does that make sense? Overprotect. I fear my children turning out like I turned out or being promiscuous. I'm going to overprotect them and never let them date until they're 90 years old. And so that controlling behavior is trying to address the fear, but it rarely. I hate to even say rarely, I want to say always, but I think that's too strong a word. But these controlling behaviors will almost never accomplish what the original fear was. It never solves the problem. This is the wrong way, in my opinion, to go about this, but I want to kind of flesh it out a little bit more. We might start obsessing over things. I've got to get that, our mind is racing. I've got to get this under control. I've got to get my son in football more often. He's not playing enough. I need to go talk to the coach. His grades are too low. I've never heard his grades too high. My parents said that all the time. He's getting C's consistently. We've got to do something about this. So obsession is a thing. Checking things. Maybe someone's been unfaithful. I need to check his emails. I need to check his cell phone. I need to check where he's going, put a tracking device in his trunk. This controlling behavior of making sure I can't be hurt again is a controlling behavior. I'm not going to get into the details of all that because that's another whole subject. Criticism can be a controlling behavior. I criticize you to try to get you to either put you down to control you there or to try to get you to do something. Maybe it's management by manipulation kind of criticism. I'll criticize, hopefully you'll get the picture. We never get the picture. I'm speaking for myself and most men. Or nagging could be men or women nagging and trying to badger to get you to believe what I believe. I need to control you because I'm afraid if we don't do this, maybe it's parenting, maybe it's schools, maybe it's finances, maybe it's a vacation. I need you to see this how I see this, and I'm afraid if you don't, we're going to go downhill or go somewhere I don't want to go. It's a very natural thing. People pleasing. I'm afraid people might reject me. I'm afraid that someone might criticize me, or if my core belief happens to be worthlessness, or I'll never amount to anything, or I feel defective or unlovable, then if I'm afraid of feeling that or thinking about that or people treating me that way, then we can please people. And then I can control how you treat me if I make you happy. Does that make sense? That's a big one. It's not domination like I must control. It's not that kind of thing, but it is very controlling. I'm controlling, or I don't want to tell you something because I don't want you to feel blank, or I don't want you to think blank. That's control. So we're afraid of it's really a very selfish thing that we're doing. Those of us that fear, this is all selfish. This is all about me not feeling bad. It's as rarely about our children or their grades. It's how it might reflect on us. I'm not saying always. I'm just saying as a general rule, this particular process, but it gets pretty dark, doesn't it? This particular process is not, but I want my kids to do well. I want them to be happy. Usually what's under that is I want to feel like a great parent. I get value when my kids do things that make me look good. I can't say that's everyone. I'm just saying I see that a whole lot. So people pleasing is way up there. Shutting down, if you can't read that. Shutting down, the person in a relationship where you've got a pursuer and a withdrawer, the withdrawer will shut down, whether it's a man or a woman. The shutting down is a control move. I feel out of control when you're criticizing, coming at me, nagging. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of off balance. I need to get control. I'll shut it down. And I'll shut it down for a while, but after a while, if you don't stop, knocking on the shell, so to speak, then rage usually happens. Usually that's when the dam breaks, which is also control. Most men know they can roar like a lion and get angry enough and fearful enough that it might scare a woman, and that will shut down the conversation. It doesn't shut it down in a healthy way. There's nothing good that comes from this, but that's often how women try to get control or men try to get control. So again, these are all controlling behaviors. And you may find I think all of us are going to find ourselves on here somewhere. We've all tried to gain control when we fear something, or maybe we've been hurt badly, kind of like what Matthew was saying a couple of weeks ago. Maybe we've been hurt badly and we fear being hurt that way again, so we control situations so that we can never get hurt. Yes? Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit last time, that fear can be your best friend. Again, I use the extreme of if you're in the jungle and you hear the roar of a lion, friend's your buddy, or if you're out in a platoon and you hear bullets, fear is a pretty good friend. Let's take cover. Let's get more people and get a strategy together to handle this. So this is not that kind of fear. That's a good point. This is more the I fear something and now I need to control it and I'm not at war, I'm in a relationship. These are more relationship dynamics, whereas, again, I've told you, when I'm out, if I'm ever out in battle, which I've never been to war, but if I ever am, I want to be with Rambo that has no feelings. I don't want anybody, all I want him to know is how to kill a whole bunch of people. I don't care if he's sad, lonely, and fearful. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, I got you covered, and then I want this big machine gun thing to come out, and I'm going to stand behind this guy like a big sissy. So I don't want anyone that's in touch with their feelings out protecting me. So this is more relationship oriented stuff. That's a great point, though. This is what the flesh is doing. This is how we try to take, and I'll show you. This will go somewhere that'll show you that in a second. But you're exactly right. Okay, or we could surrender. Fear also can lead to surrendering to God. And I'll show you a process that will help us understand how to do this. Surrendering to God, and this is what that's going to yield, okay? Usually, and there's a lot more. I mean, it's peace, trust, protection, intimacy, rest, joy, provision, humility, freedom. I mean, basically, if you compare these two lists, this is more like, it's not the deeds of the flesh, but it's more like the deeds of the flesh. And this is more like, and you'll see some fruits of the Spirit. So surrendering to God is saying, you ultimately are my provider. You ultimately are my protector. That doesn't mean let your kids run out in the street. There is some control that's very important and very necessary. If your kids run into the street, if you don't go tackle them and you go, well, they're going to learn when they get hit by that car, there's a consequence. That might be our eternal kind of consequence we might not want them to go to. So some control with small children, but as they grow, learning consequences is a pretty important thing to happen. So again, these are the two extremes of it. Basically, the top part is God is in control. The bottom part is I need to be in control. I don't know that I can trust God, or I don't even know to think about God right now. I just see a problem. A lot of times our strengths are our biggest drawbacks in a situation when we can control, because we're gifted at control. We're gifted at solving problems. We're gifted at arguing. We're gifted at protection. I don't know, whatever your gifting thing is, the I need to be in control thing is diametrically opposed to surrendering and letting God be in control. It's saying, I know better than you, or I don't trust you to control this the way I want you to. And I can take you back to a few years ago when we thought my daughter was dying of cancer. I had a very candid conversation with God, and I just said, I trust you with my daughter's life, but please don't expect me to be happy about this if you take her life in a few months. And so that's where I had to go. That's as good as I could do. And I don't think God would expect me to say, well, I expect you to have joy, joy, joy way down in your heart. Me go, where, that kind of thing. I think God, I don't know what God understands and what he doesn't, but I just know trusting him isn't without pain sometimes, but it is trusting one greater than me. That ultimately I know he knows what's best for me. Ultimately I believe he never allows anything to happen to any of us that's not in our best interest. I have a hard time with that sometimes. When I first heard that, I really struggled with it. Why would he let me go through